The spark. At the dawn of the 20th century, Europe stood proud, rich in power, culture, and empire. Steam and steel had transformed the world. Science and progress promised a bright future. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Old empires faced new ambitions. Nationalism, militarism, and alliances had locked the continent into an uneasy peace. Two rival camps emerged, the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, and the Triple Entente of Britain, France, and Russia. Each side prepared for war, all while claiming to preserve peace. Then, on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip. The shot echoed across Europe. In Vienna, fury. In Berlin, resolve. In St. Petersburg, mobilization. Within weeks, a web of alliances turned a Balkan crisis into a global conflict. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia rose to defend its Slavic ally. Germany declared war on Russia, and soon after, on France. When German troops crossed neutral Belgium, Britain entered the war. By August 1914, the great powers of Europe were engulfed. Men cheered in the streets, believing the war would be over by Christmas. They were wrong. The Great War had begun. The war erupts. The summer of 1914 erupted in fire. Germany unleashed the Schlieffen Plan, a sweeping offensive through Belgium toward France. It was a gamble to defeat France quickly before turning east to face Russia. But the plan met fierce resistance. Belgian troops fought stubbornly. British and French forces halted the German advance at the Battle of the Marne. By September, the dream of a quick victory had died. Both sides dug in. From the North Sea to the Swiss border, soldiers carved deep trenches into the earth, a line of defense stretching nearly 500 miles. The Western Front was born. What followed was a new kind of war, industrial, mechanical, and merciless. Artillery thundered day and night. Machine guns cut down waves of men in seconds. Barbed wire and mud trapped the living and the dead alike. New weapons emerged: poison gas, flamethrowers, tanks, and aircraft. Each promised victory. None could break the stalemate. By the end of 1914, millions were dead or wounded. Yet the war had only just begun. The optimism of summer gave way to the long agony of trench warfare. The Western Front. In the trenches, life was misery. Men lived knee-deep in mud, surrounded by rats, lice, and the ever-present fear of death. Shells screamed overhead. The ground shook. Friends vanished in an instant. Daily rations were scarce. Letters from home were lifelines. For months at a time, soldiers endured the unendurable cold, hunger, exhaustion. Major battles became symbols of suffering. At Verdun, in 1916, the German army sought to bleed France white. The battle raged for 10 months. More than 700,000 men fell for a few miles of ground. That same year, at the Somme, Allied forces launched a massive assault. On the first day alone, 60,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded, the bloodiest day in British military history. By November, both sides had lost more than 1 million men, and yet, the front lines hardly moved. The Great War had become a war of attrition, not of glory or honor, but of endurance. Both sides waited for something, anything, that could tip the balance. Beyond the trenches, the home front also suffered. Families rationed food, women filled factory floors. Nations mobilized their entire societies for war. It was no longer just a battle of armies, it was a struggle of nations. The global conflict. Though fought largely in Europe, the Great War soon spanned the globe. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers. British and Arab forces fought across deserts and dunes. In Africa, colonial troops clashed for control of distant territories. On the seas, German submarines stalked Allied ships, sinking military and civilian vessels alike. The war reached Asia and the Pacific, where Japan, allied with Britain, seized German colonies. It was truly a world war. By 1917, exhaustion set in. On the Eastern Front, Russia's vast armies suffered catastrophic losses. Then revolution struck. The Tsar was overthrown and the new Bolshevik government sought peace. In early 1918, Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, ending its war with Germany. But as one front closed, another opened. In April 1917, the United States entered the war. After German submarines attacked American ships and the infamous Zimmermann telegram revealed German plans to incite Mexico against the U.S. American industry and manpower would soon turn the tide. For the first time, fresh armies crossed the Atlantic to join the exhausted Allies. The balance of power began to shift. The turning point. By 1918, both sides were near collapse. Germany, freed from fighting Russia, launched a massive offensive on the Western Front, the Spring Offensive. For a moment, victory seemed within reach, but the Allies held. With American troops arriving in their hundreds of thousands, the counterattack began. The 100 Days Offensive pushed the Germans back across France. Towns liberated, trenches abandoned. The front that had stood still for years finally moved. At home, the Central Powers crumbled. Austria-Hungary splintered into fragments. The Ottoman Empire sought peace. In Germany, strikes and protests erupted. The Kaiser fled to exile. On November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., the guns fell silent. An armistice was signed in a railway carriage in Compiègne, France. After 4 years of destruction, the Great War was over. More than 16 million people, soldiers and civilians, were dead. Empires had vanished. The map of Europe would never be the same again. The end and the legacy. In 1919, the victors gathered at the Palace of Versailles to shape the peace. The Treaty of Versailles placed full blame for the war on Germany and imposed heavy reparations. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were dismantled. New nations emerged: Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. The League of Nations was created, a hopeful attempt to prevent future wars. But resentment festered. Germany felt humiliated. Borders were redrawn, but bitterness remained. For millions, the war's scars ran deep: physical, emotional, generational. A lost generation of poets, artists, and thinkers emerged from the ruins, forever changed by the horrors they had witnessed. The Great War had promised to be the war to end all wars. Instead, it became the prelude to another, even more devastating conflict. As the 1920s dawned, the world tried to rebuild. But the lessons of the trenches, the cries from no man's land, and the silence that followed the guns, they remained. The First World War changed everything. Nations, empires, and the very idea of humanity itself. The modern world was born from its ashes. This was the Great War, 1914 to 1918, a world remade, and a peace that would not last.